My name is Mark. This is Zen Talk, the Four Noble Truths. All right, so this is the first of the Four Noble Truths. This is called the Noble Truth of Suffering. Now, let's keep in mind that the Gautama Buddha wrote two sermons. The first of the sermons is the Four Noble Truths, and the second one is the Eightfold Path. These sermons were allegedly passed down in an oral tradition. So generally, when in an oral tradition, things are sort of in bite-like ways of remembering. They're very short, very concise, and they sort of chain together. And in an oral tradition, you cannot have long litanies like you see in a book. These are going to be very short and very concise. So, when we look at the Four Noble Truths and later the Eightfold Path, we need to take this in the context of spirituality, not physical, not phenomena manifest, but in a spiritual sense. So we'll start here again with the noble truth of suffering. The Buddha is talking about spiritual suffering. That is what a sentient being feels when deprived, blocked, or simply lost when seeking spiritual salvation. This suffering deeply affects the very psyche of a being that we in the West would call mental anguish. So we're talking about a spiritual suffering. We're not talking, this is not like being too hot, too cold, or hungry, or wet, or any sort of physical suffering. This is not pain or sickness. This is spiritual suffering. And when deprived or denied or blocked or just lost, when they're looking for a spiritual salvation, and we're really talking about a way out, or a way to relieve spiritual suffering. So here, you change around you, the anguish, the lost. This is all what we're talking about here. All right, let's go to the second one. All right, the noble truth of the cause of suffering. So we can see the suffering, but now what is the cause of the suffering? Sentient beings become spiritually wounded, which creates spiritual suffering from the mental coveting of things not possessed, that is denied, blocked, and seemingly unattainable. And down here we have a quote: "Man is affected not by events, but by the view he takes of them." And so the spiritual wound is really what we're talking about. If you really think about it, maybe if you start off with a perfect sphere, a ball, unblemished, complete and whole, but then you poke it, you've created a wound on it. And if you keep poking it with anything, this can be bad logic or wrong religion, abuse, just about anything, or just keep telling somebody, no, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. There's a lot of ways to spiritually wound yourself or another person. So the spiritual wounds themselves, which creates the spiritual suffering, which goes back to the first one, from the mental coveting of things not possessed. Sometimes, I really want to be a monk, or I really want to be recognized, or I really want to have relief of my suffering. So this is a coveting of things not possessed spiritually, and that you feel is denied, blocked, or seemingly unattainable. I run across a lot of people that so covet, wanting enlightenment, and that becomes a spiritual wound in itself because it's not possessed. They see it as denied, blocked, or it's unattainable to them. And this is a big one. So this is what we're talking about. The cause of suffering is the spiritual wounds and how they are created here. All right, we'll go to the third. The noble truth of the end of sufferings. So now we're talking about how to end the wounds, how to end these spiritual wounds. The spiritual wound remains as long as the cause of the wound remains. The only way to remove the cause of this wound is to relinquish, to renounce the very thing that inflicted the wound. So this is a big one. It's the spiritual wound remains because there's something still aggregating, that's still keeping the wound there. It's like you're stuck with, it's like if somebody sticks you with a knife in your chest, and you go to the doctor and you say, "Doctor, my chest hurts, but I don't know why." And the doctor goes, "Oh, well, there's a knife in your chest." Obviously, then you would realize, "Oh my God, this knife in my chest is my wound. Maybe if I take this knife out, and that would let the wound heal." Well, this is the same thing in a spiritual wound. So as long as we keep the thing in our spiritual wound, which could be a desire, a want, a view, a wrong view even, or just an anger. Some people get angry at the Buddha or the Buddhism or the path. It could be anything that keeps the wound there. So the only way to get rid of the wound is to relinquish, which is to remove or to let go. Because sometimes we hold on to the knife in our chest because we just don't know any better. So in the case of somebody who is seeking enlightenment, sometimes to relinquish it is the way to find it, or helps out. Sometimes somebody who says, "Oh, I just want to be so recognized at my Zen center for my hard work," well, to relinquish that would actually go a long ways to healing a spiritual wound. So only through relinquishment, to renounce that thing that inflicts the wound, is the way out of it. So this is Peace Pilgrim down here. I actually met here years ago. And so anything you cannot relinquish when it has outlived its usefulness possesses you. And in this materialistic age, a great many of us are possessed by our possessions. She was a very wise. She ended up having a lot of financial scandals around her at the very end. But when I met her, she seemed to be very wise. And here we have, in order to acquire anything in the physical universe, you have to relinquish your attachment to it. And it's kind of true, kind of not true. It's because it can't. If you want something, it doesn't necessarily create the spiritual wound, but it can create a spiritual wound by wanting it, and then you're kind of creating an emotional. It can become a wound if you're creating emotion around it, or if you're creating a lot of drama around it. If you want to be an ordained monk, but then you're being told no, 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 and you start to resent the people, resent the teacher, resent the organization that you feel is denying you, that can create a spiritual wound. All right, we'll go to the last one. All right, this is the last of the Four Noble Truths. The noble truth of the path leading to the end of suffering. Those who are spiritually wounded do not know the cause of the wound. The Noble Eightfold Path is a means to know the cause of the wound and is a means to cease the further creation of additional spiritual wounds for yourself and others. So this is so true. somebody they will become spiritually wounded, or they will know they have spiritually wounds. They will know, but they don't know why. They don't know the cause, and they have no clue how to cease the wounds and how to stop the wounds. But also they have no, and then it's once you do the ceasing and stopping, then it's like, well, gee, I think I'd like to just leave, like to get out of this. So this is the Noble Eightfold Path. This is Buddha's, or the alleged Buddha's, second sermon, and he only had 2 sermons, remember. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Paths. That is his 2 sermons. So here we have, these are not really, these are really, I would say, bastardized statements of the path. The actual path is much deeper than this, but right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. These are not morals. These are not commandments. These are not or anything like that. These are just entry points for you to look at your own spiritual wounds, your own spiritual being. And then sometimes this is also called the middle way, the Noble Eightfold Path, the middle way, or the threefold path. And people like to say it's based on virtue, morality, and there's a bit of that. Concentration in mind, which is absolute, and wisdom and knowledge, which is absolute. So here, the threefold path, the middle way, is another term of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's just a more condensed term. Perhaps these 3 things here are easily remembered rather than the full 8. Just depends on you and your own needs. All right. So that's my talk about the 4 Noble Truths. Thank you, and please remember to like and subscribe.